Okay, so first I would like to introduce our moderator this evening. Cami Ostman, founder of the Narrative Project, has published a memoir, Second Wind, One Woman's Midlife Quest to Run 7 Marathons on 7 Continents, and has co-edited several anthologies, including Beyond Belief, The Secret Lives of Women in Extreme Religions, and True Stories, volumes 1 through 3, the anthologies with the Narrative Project. She's been profiled in Fitness Magazine, and her books have been reviewed in O Magazine, The Atlantic, and The Washington Post. So our special guest author this evening, Lisa Dailey, is an avid traveler and writer. In her time abroad, she unearthed new ways of looking at her life through her discoveries in remote corners of the world, and she continues to enrich her life through travel. She's currently working on a recipe anthology, as well as her first work of fiction. A native Montanan, Lisa now makes her home by the ocean here in Bellingham, Washington, but returns to her roots every summer for a healthy dose of mountains and big sky. Lisa is the owner of Silent Sidekick and Sidekick Press, where she helps guide authors through their publishing journey. We are here today to celebrate this beautiful book right here, Square Up, 50,000 Miles in Search of a Way Home. So please welcome Lisa Dailey and Cami Ostman.
Thanks, Claire.
Yeah, thank you. Hi, Lisa.
Hi.
This is so fun for me to be able to interview you because we have our lives intertwined in all kinds of ways. So to be able to be here and celebrate this with you and to have been a part of your book writing journey. And actually, we even got our first travel experience together recently too. So I'm just super excited for you, and what a privilege to be here.
I know. Thank you so much. Well, I mean, it's thanks to you that I am sitting here, honestly, because who knows where this would have turned out without you and the Narrative Project. So thank you for being here.
Yeah. Well, let's get started. And
okay.
Everybody hopefully has the book in their hand, or they will have the book in their hand, but they haven't read it yet, most likely. So, because this is the launch after all. So let's just start from the beginning. This book, Square Up, it's the result of a trip abroad that your family took around the world. So how did that concept come about for the trip? So give us a little overview.
Yeah, the concept actually came about in 2010. Ray and I my husband Ray and I had always been pretty big travelers within the United States, but we decided we wanted to up our game a little bit. And so we decided on a 2-week vacation to New Zealand, kind of far enough away to be foreign, yet they still spoke English, and we felt safe to take our kids there, who were then 8 and 10. And we had such a grand time in 2 weeks in New Zealand, traveling around the South Island and the North Island. And it was during the Winter Olympics as well. So as we were in New Zealand, we were watching the Olympics, and we just kind of got that travel bug and said, how fabulous would it be to travel around the world and take our kids? And the kids seemed game. I mean, they were 8 and 10. What did they know? But, everyone seemed like they were all down to go do it. And so we just set our sights kind of out there at that time frame and thought in, sometime around 2015, we would take off and take a year break from our lives to see the world.
Yeah. And how many countries did you ultimately end up going to?
Oh, RJ would know for sure, but I believe it was 13 countries and some like 80 locations.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, so you planned the trip and, for 5 years. And then your plan was to take the kids out of school for a period of time. Right. But this trip actually coincided with a really hard time in your life.
It did.
So, yeah. So tell me about what happened in the years leading up to the trip that made it take on a bigger meaning than just an adventure with your family.
Right. So before the trip, in the 5 years kind of leading up to that, I lost 7 family members in the period of 5 years, including my mom and my dad and a 26-year-old brother and my father-in-law. So kind of a lot of people that were very, very close in our lives.
Mm-hmm. Right. And so the adventure then, when, by the time that you embarked, you were in a pretty heavy place personally. Right.
I was in a pretty heavy place. I had always been someone who felt really kind of in control of my life. And at that point, I felt very, very lost, very out of control, very not knowing what was going to happen next, and kind of unsure of life.
Right. So it wasn't as if you decided to go on a trip in order to heal, but it definitely was that, you know, there was a lot of pain that you were holding and leaving behind, as if you can leave pain behind. And you have a reading for us from the beginning of your book, right? Which I think sets the scene.
Yeah, it kind of sets the scene for the whole thing. Mm-hmm. You ready?
Yep, ready.
All right. The notion that bad things happens in 3 is bullshit. I was 35 the summer my father died. I hadn't seen him in years. Cal, my maternal grandfather, died 3 short months later. As leaves changed from green to orange, it seemed even the trees mourned. As a new year began, holding promise for new beginnings, my 23-year-old brother, Zach, overdosed just as he was gaining a foothold in sobriety. Still reeling from the death of Zach, our mother was diagnosed with an aggressive form of melanoma before summer arrived once more. Year after year, the deaths continued as if trying to keep up with the changing of the seasons. Fall, great-grandmother, old age. Winter, father-in-law, cancer. Spring, 16-year-old cousin, suicide. The cycle of death concluded with my mother days after I turned 40. Ironically, right at the lowest point in my life, when I was begging for the universe to give me a break, it did just that. The details for the round-the-world trip we'd been dreaming about for years fell into place. We had done enough research to prepare our family for long-term travel. We had the means to make the trip a reality. All that was left was my willingness to let go of my fear and embrace the unknown. Easier said than done.
Yeah. What were you afraid of?
Everything. Everything. I think that there's like a whole passage of everything that I was afraid of going into that trip. Just from not having enough money, not being able to speak the language, not knowing what to eat, not knowing where to stay. Based on the way we were traveling, we weren't even sure what our next destination was. So,
right. Let's talk about that piece of it, because I know that you flew something called, which I'd never heard of this before. I read your book in its original form when we were working together on it, but you flew something called Space Available a lot of that time.
Mm-hmm.
So how did you choose where to go, and what is Space Available? Like, kind of give us that part of it. It's a big piece of the puzzle.
Right. So my husband, Ray, is a dentist, but he works in Indian Health Services, which falls under the Public Health Service, which falls under the Navy, which makes us sort of quasi-military. So we have all of the military benefits that come along with us kind of down the line. And one of those benefits is space available travel. So every day in the world, there are planes flying from base to base, moving troops and equipment and supplies all over the world. As those flights go from base to base, if there's space available, anyone who's in the military and their families can take a hop and just, it's basically like hitching a ride to the next base. So the problem with that is that they only announce their flight plan 72 hours in advance. And those flight plans can change at the drop of a hat or even mid-flight. So we never really knew where we were going. We just knew that we were going to start out at Travis Air Force Base because it had probably some of the most flights. And we wanted to go west. So they had a lot of flights headed towards Hawaii and Guam. So we knew that that's where we were going to start, but we really didn't know where we were going to end up at the next spot until they called our names to get on the flight.
Yeah, I can imagine that being pretty anxiety provoking. How old were your kids at the time?
They were 14 and 15.
14 and 15. And so, I mean, you're the mom and tell us a little bit about what that was like to not know, I mean, how you handled it, how the kids handled it, and how
I didn't handle it very well. I think everyone was more at ease than me. Everyone else just assumed everything was going to work out just fine. And I mean, that's sort of the attitude they have. I'd always been a planner. I'm still a planner. I know everything that's going to happen. I have everything planned out. I have hotels planned out, and if we're going on big trips now, I get money in advance and I know where I'm going to stay at least the first night. And to not have any of that in place and not being able to do any research ahead of time was very anxiety producing for me.
Yeah, I can imagine having traveled with you. So for everybody who doesn't know, Lisa and I actually recently took a trip to Arizona, and I mean, you had everything planned. I was like, because I'm a big traveler too, and I was so relaxed. I thought, oh my God, I don't have to do anything. Lisa has the whole itinerary, the car, she knows the route we're going. So I cannot really quite wrap my mind around what that must have been like for you to just be waiting to find out where you were going.
Yeah, it was stressful.
Yeah. So one of the things that you did plan though, once you, by the way, I just want to remind everybody, if you have questions, to make sure to pop them in the Q&A. Cause I know, if I were listening in on this, I would be like full of travel questions. So Lisa can answer anything, you know, I
can try.
Throw her a hard ball. Yeah. So anyway, when you got to a particular place and you knew where you were going to be, I know that one of the things that was really important to you was to give your kids in particular really interesting memories and experiences. So when you were somewhere, you would research really off the beaten track things that your family could do. Mm-hmm. So if you can share a memory or two about some of the crazy things that you ended up taking your kids to do.
Yeah, I actually pulled a reading for that. If you'd like a reading.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Okay. So this reading is in Cambodia, and we had arrived, and I was still a little bit jittery about being in a new country, because once we were there, I kind of settled into it and where I could plan next steps, but we were brand new in Cambodia. And so we're just kind of looking at our computers and getting ready to figure out what we're doing next. So we settled into our hotel, and Ray and I began the now familiar process of researching what kinds of adventures we could have. Look at this, Ray said, turning his laptop toward me. Oh, we have to go there. Without telling the kids too much, Ray and I took the boys to lunch at a place specializing in rural Cambodian cuisine. The restaurant served as a training ground for former street youth or those who came from other marginalized and at-risk groups. The goal for student staff were to learn new skills that would allow them to get into the workforce and improve their lives. I made sure RJ and Tyler both saw a tarantula on the menu. After an initial shock, the boys were game to try the deep-fried tarantula appetizer. Tyler even decided to embrace this culinary experience and ordered red tree ant soup. What do tarantulas taste like? RJ asked the waitress as we placed our order. Chicken, the waitress said, giving him a little wink. None of us expected her next question, though. Do you want to see live tarantulas? Like before they are cooked? Yeah, we have some to hold. Okay, Ray answered, a little hesitant. The waitress returned to our table a few minutes later with a small white saucer and an upside-down cup in hand. She placed it on the table and then lifted the cup to reveal two tarantulas the size of eggs cuddled together with their spindly black legs intertwined. The waitress picked one up and held it out for us to take. My adrenaline spiked as Ray tentatively extended his hand while asking, is it safe? Do they bite? Only if threatened, but their venom is weak. She placed one spider, then the second in Ray's open hands, none of us questioning her definition of weak. I pulled out my camera to document the dread creeping over Ray's face as one spider crawled up his arm, headed right for the gap between his sleeve and flesh, perhaps to nestle in the warmth of his armpit. Okay, you can take them back, Ray said, his eyes imploring the waitress to remove the spiders. Does anyone else want to hold them? Our heads all shook in unison. There was no way the rest of us would touch those spiders. A few minutes later, she returned with a plate of 3 deep-fried tarantulas and a side of black pepper lime sauce. Who in the world determined that black pepper and lime were the perfect accompaniment to tarantula? We each broke off a deep brown leg, dipped it in the sweet, tangy sauce, and tentatively bit into the appendage. They had the crunch and taste of overcooked French fries. Then we turned to the abdomen. When cutting, the rubbery body proved futile. Ray and Ty each took a hold of a spider belly and popped the whole thing into their mouths in one go. They chewed and finally grabbed their drinks and washed down the masticated bodies. Well, I asked. Definitely didn't taste like chicken, Ray said, with flecks of the black body and hair lodged between his teeth. More like digested insects, Tyler added.
Oh my God. I haven't read that passage in a really long time. I was totally grossing out over here. Yeah. Ew.
Ew.
Yeah. Ew. I know that is super gross, but it is a memory that your family will have. I mean, like literally your kids will tell their kids, you know what I mean? Like that's a lifetime sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So you must have really gotten to know, you must have really gotten to know each other. I mean, I think families know each other pretty well, but there is something about, moving around from place to place. You kind of get to know, I think you and I agree on one of the benefits of travel is that you get to know yourself differently.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So I'm curious, what did you learn about yourself and or your family during this whole, journey? And what do you hope other families will take away from your story?
As far as the family's concerned, I think that we really had an opportunity with our kids at a very, one of those crucial times in their lives, at that early kind of mid-teenage years where things can really go off the rails if we hadn't paid attention. And I think that we really gained a better understanding for them. And I think that they really have the opportunity to talk to us and see us as not just mom and dad, but as fellow travelers and people who were there for them when they needed us to be. And I have to say, like, all of our communication and relationships after that trip have been amazing. Mm-hmm. They're amazing kids. We have a great bond. They tell us all kinds of stuff. They ask for help when they need it. And high school was a breeze. So yeah, I mean, I hope that other parents get that too, especially at this time, being home with COVID and being in such close proximity. I really do hope that parents are, I know it's super, super hard, but I hope that there is some bond that's gained from that with the kids and just knowing that they're there for each other.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I really like what you said about seeing each other as fellow travelers. And I do, I think having worked with families over the years as a therapist, like for children to see their parents as fellow travelers, really does open space in the family in a way than when the kids just see parents as people who ought to have it all together. Mm-hmm. And when you travel around like you all did, then there's no way you could have had it all together all along the way. And I know I know the book really chronicles a lot of the mishaps, things that happened where there were barriers that had to be overcome and like no really clear idea about how to do it. One of the stories that comes to mind is the story of getting trapped in the
parking lot
in mm-hmm. Japan. Yeah. Tell what happened.
We got to Japan and we just decided to take off in a car and go and see Okinawa, and without any thought to money or anything. And we got to our destination with the help of the GPS and pulled into a lot and went and toured this fabulous place and then came back out and couldn't get out. So we went to a 7-Eleven. It wasn't a 7-Eleven, but it looked like a 7-Eleven, whatever it was called in Okinawa. I don't know. And we thought, oh, we'll just get some cash out of the ATM. Well, they don't accept US bank cards. So then we got pointed to a bank and they don't accept bank cards. So we were stuck and I panicked. I was just in a panic. Mm-hmm. Like, what are we going to do? I was freaking out and everybody was like, it's just a parking lot. We'll figure it out. What's the worst thing that could possibly happen here?
Right. It was pre-Uber too. So it wasn't like you could just, Uber your way back. Right.
No. And to top it off, I was the only one who could drive in Japan. So, which was on the opposite side of the car, on the opposite side of the road with no signs in English. Everything was in Japanese. So
right. Yeah.
It just added to my stress there.
No, I totally understand that. Yeah.
Everyone else was chill around me. I mean, the boys and Ray, they're just like, okay, well, what next? What should we do next? What should we do next?
Right.
We figured it out.
Well, you're here.
So I'm here. I made it out of the parking lot.
Clearly you made it out of the parking lot, but I have had a lot of experiences in Japan in particular where I've been someplace and completely befuddled about how to get the resource that I needed, whether it was a ticket or money or, how to figure out which stop along the route to go. So,
right. And it was a lesson for us because after that, every country that we went to, we made sure before we left the airport that we had some local currency.
Right. Right. One needs local currency.
Yes.
Right. All right. Well, and let's just talk about the writing of the book a little bit.
Okay.
So why was it, I know that you kept a blog while you were traveling, right?
I did.
So you did share your experiences. Why was it important to you to actually write a book and to write this book?
I think, it had always been a dream of mine to write a book. I've had that as sort of, on my bucket list as a life goal for decades. When I came back, I mean, a lot of people said you should write a book. And I thought, well, yeah, I'm going to write a book one day. This wasn't the book I thought I was going to write, but I think that there was a couple reasons. I think I really needed to process everything that happened. Mm-hmm. I don't think I could really understand everything that I was going through in the moment when we were there. So I think it was a really good opportunity for me to slow down and really kind of read through those passages. My blog posts were more like, we did this and we did that and we did the other thing. But I needed to reflect on what was happening internally with me during that time as well. And I think that I did that. And I think it was really beneficial to see that and look back on those experiences and realize how much benefit I got out of that trip.
Mm-hmm. Right. It was like you had to come home, kind of hover above it in a meaning making sort of way and ask mm-hmm. yourself, how did I change? Mm-hmm. Right. You knew you came home and you knew you had changed. And I think, as you said, you feel like your family changed as well. But in the writing of the book, you have to ask yourself a question: how does the narrator change?
Right.
Right. That's what we're always harping on. How does the narrator change? So, so Jill actually just popped a question in the chat that would be a great follow-up to that, about how you approach the writing. You did have your blog posts, but did you then make an outline? Did you just sort of do stream of consciousness? What was your process?
So I thought, Jill, at first that I could just put all my blog posts together and call it a book. And then I read it and I was like, oh my God, this is the most boring book ever. And about that time, I became acquainted with Cami and the Narrative Project. And I thought, I really need help. I need to understand. And so going through her classes and learning about the dialogue and learning about the narrative arc of the character, from that point, I really decided that I was going to use the heroine's journey as kind of an outline to my story. And so I plotted it from there and still followed my timeline. And it really just kind of, I found that it fit. Mm-hmm. I had kind of thought of different ways to pace myself through it. But when I found the heroine's journey, I was able to put all of my scenes in. Yeah. And I thought, okay, this is what happened. This is really how it worked. And I felt like I could build my story into that. Yeah. So that's how it ultimately came out.
Yeah, I remember you turned in at one point the stages in the heroine's journey, and then like the chapters and the events of the things that happened and how that fit in. And so, I mean, if anybody reads your book, which everybody here will, and if you haven't bought it, you should totally go and do that. And also pop questions in the Q&A button down below if you have questions for Lisa. But if anybody reads your book, then they will know that how your narrator, how you changed in the process of the travel experience. I'm just curious, how did you change in the process of writing the book?
You mean as a writer?
Yeah.
As a writer?
Yeah. How did writing a book actually change you? This is a trick question, not a trick question, but a surprise question.
Mm-hmm. It is a surprise question. I think that I definitely grew as a writer. I think I learned a lot of devices that I may not have been totally aware of before. I mean, I'm a pretty avid reader. I read probably at least a book or two every week. And, once you learn all of the devices that are out there as you're writing about scene setting and about character building and about the arcs, you never read the same way again. You're like, I find that now I'm always picking apart the stories I'm reading and listening to. And I'm like, oh, right, you're doing that right there. So I think that I definitely grew as a writer. and understand a lot more about the process.
Right. And I mean, if I could make an observation too, I mean, because we coached all the way through the writing of it, you know, one of the questions that we were always pondering is, okay, this really interesting thing happened. You know,
what?
So what? You know, what does it mean? And so you really had to come back to your experiences over and over and over again, as any memoir writer has to, and say, well, what does that mean? How does that relate to the question, the big question that the book is asking? And I think I observed you really making meaning of your experience as you were writing the book too. Right.
I think that feeling just in general, it has always been a little bit difficult for me. I'm always sort of reluctant to show too much and to put too much out there. So for me, it was super beneficial to really examine it and understand what it all meant in my life.
Yeah. Yeah, that's right. And now you have I think it's going to be fun. Have your kids read it yet?
No.
I mean, I think
they've read pieces.
Yeah. I think it'll be really interesting one day when they read, you know, your book and then they ask themselves what the meaning of the trip was for them. You know, it'll be a fun point of conversation. So why, you know, you've written this memoir, and I know that you're really a supporter of writers, not just memoir writers, but certainly novelists, poets, and you publish writers of all genres yourself in your publishing company, Sidekick Press. And so I'm curious though, like, why would you encourage people to write their memoir if it's on their heart to do it? Like if somebody's saying, yeah, I had this experience, or I grew up with this interesting or hard thing that happened and I want to write about it, why should they?
You know, I think that that's really easy to look on and say, I'm nothing special. My story is nothing special. It doesn't matter. And I mean, everybody has a story. And I kind of, as I started to put this book out there, thought the same thing, you know, so what? So I've had a lot of grief in my life, and I took a trip and I felt better about it. You know, who cares? And I sent my book out there to ask some people for blurbs. And one person who's on the call today was a few pages into my book and sent me back a message saying, oh my gosh, your book came into my life at this time when I so needed to hear it. I identified with you being a strong woman and feeling totally at a loss in the world. And I am so thankful that your book came into my life, and it's great. I'm loving it. And I thought that's all I need.
Yeah.
If that's the only comment I ever get on my book,
right.
It was just that I could touch one person out there with that story.
Yeah. It's a really powerful experience, isn't it? When you
oh my gosh, I think I'm tearing up just thinking about it, but I think I cried like when I read that message. It was so very touching to hear that.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. Because writing a memoir is not just scribbling it out. You know, we do that to start with. We have to get that draft on the page, but you go back in again and again and keep asking harder questions of your life and of the narrator on the page. And then when you put it out in the world, you know, and you get that kind of feedback in return, Lisa, that, you know, something you wrote was universal, right? That's pretty cool.
Yeah. And so I think that could be the case for anyone. You know, I just had lunch with my brother in Arizona who's about to embark on this fabulous journey. And he was thinking about writing, and he said, you know, a lot of people do it. Nobody cares. And I said, it doesn't matter. It's your story, and you have something to say, and you never know who might read that and feel something about it. And I really secretly hope he'll write something about his journey when he gets back.
I bet he will.
I hope so.
I bet he will. I know you have another reading for us. You want to give us the final reading?
Yeah, this is
we have
last one here.
A lot of questions to get to too.
Yeah. So this is in Myanmar, and this kind of sums up a little bit about how my life changed. We'd seen tons of temples, and my kids were frankly sick of temples at this point. And so we were keeping this next adventure a secret from them. So go ahead, you can tell them, Ray said. Well, when we were in Yangon, we booked a trip to see sunrise over the temples of Bagan. But this time we're going to see the sunrise from hot air balloons, I said. Really? Ray asked. RJ asked. Tyler's face brightened. We get to go in a hot air balloon? The whole mood of the room changed to one of excitement. We were picked up before sunrise the next morning and taken to a field where we were fed coffee, tea, and pastries while we waited for the light to arrive. 13 balloons were being launched, and the passengers buzzed with excitement as the large balloons were unfurled. The sky began to lighten, and the crews filled the balloons with warm air by blasting jets of fire into the openings. The colorful orbs gradually rose from their horizontal positions until they were floating above their much smaller passenger baskets. Okay, we're ready to board, our pilot announced. She described the loading procedure and went over safety precautions, then instructed us to climb into the basket and take a seat in preparation for takeoff. Once the basket lifted a few feet off the ground, we stood and looked out at 12 other balloons, all rising together, taking off into the calm pre-dawn sky. Mom, what floor would this be in a building? RJ asked, trying to gauge just how high we were. Oh, I don't know, maybe 200, but I don't think there are any buildings that tall. Thinking about that number put our elevation in perspective. We were higher than the tallest building in the world, in a basket attached to a giant bag of hot air with little sound other than the burner's jet heating the air. We drifted over the temples for more than an hour, rising as high as 2,000 feet. It's so still up here. I expected it to be windy, I commented to the pilot. Many people say that, she replied, but we are moving at the same speed as the wind, so it feels still, even though you would feel a breeze if you were standing on the ground. My life had been moving in such a way that I felt constantly knocked around by the harsh winds of life. The trick, I could see, was to rise above it, to float along at the speed of the wind and not let it whip me out of the sky, to find balance.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Lisa. And that is a great example of the what and the so what, right?
Yeah.
Right. To find the meaning in the event. Nicely done. Yeah. Lots of good cheers for you in the chat around that. Do you want to take some questions from the audience?
Sure. Yeah.
We just have a bunch. Let's see, skim through here. Okay. Not in any particular order. I'll try to get to as many of them as I can. Laura Kalpakian wanted to know, how did your kids do with the lack of stability? Like they were kind of moving around with you and not anchored down in one place in one school. How was that for them?
I think before we left, we actually got their buy-in to go on this trip. If they had been adamantly against it, I'd like to say that we probably would have taken that into consideration, but they were gung-ho to go. And we talked about potential difficulties before we left. We talked about how we might get sick of each other, about how we might need space from one another. And we talked about strategies that we might employ when that happened. And so a couple of things we would do is we would, hotel rooms around the world are not built for a family of 4. They're built for a couple. Maybe a couple with one child. So oftentimes we'd get 2 hotel rooms, and then we would swap who we were staying with so that we never had too much time with one person. So if Tyler and RJ needed a break from each other, they would swap parents,
Right.
Frey and I needed a break from each other, we'd swap with one of the kids. So
right. That's great. So
and it also gave them, they also had to grow up because they actually enjoyed the little bit of freedom that they got too. They loved having their own hotel room.
I bet.
Yeah.
I bet they did.
At 14 and 15, they loved it.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's a couple of questions about space A, and one of them sort of relates to this togetherness thing. Could everybody travel together with space A? Or so were you waiting for 4 spots? And also I know that it wasn't always like 4 chairs like we think of traveling in an airplane. So say more about how you travel, if you travel together, and also what some of those flights looked like.
Right. So yes, when you sign up on the Space A roster, it's all based on this hierarchy. So there's like 6 different travel categories. So the first one's emergency travel. The second one's, troop movement or like if you're being relocated to a different base, that kind of thing. We fell down at level 6. So we're the bottom of the barrel because we were retirees. Ray had just retired from his 20 years of service. And when you sign up, you do sign up with 4 seats. So yes, sometimes we got knocked out of line because there was only 3 seats available. So we didn't go. So we waited for 4. Right. And the kinds of planes that we were flying on were not typical jet planes. They were cargo planes. They were the big, bulky, gray C-130s with the tail that opens the back, that folds down, and then cargo netting, no windows, in bare bones interior. Cold, very cold.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Linda wants to know if you would do it again, and if you would, where would you go? If you would take by Space A specifically,
Oh, absolutely. Ray and our kids are gonna age out and not be eligible for that anymore, probably within the next few years. But Ray and him as a retiree and me as a spouse, we can use that forever, and absolutely we will use it as soon as a few more years down the road when he retires for good. I could definitely see us using that all the time. I would love to go to Japan, mainland Japan. The only part of Japan we were in on this trip was Okinawa, but I would love to go to Tokyo and see Japan. And there's a couple of bases there. We also thought we might end up in Korea. And so going to Korea is an option, and Europe for sure, because we can get to Europe really cheap.
Yeah. What a great benefit to have, for, being connected to the military. I know it was fun to travel with you because you were just waving your military ID around like this, getting us in for, oh, don't worry, I've got a military discount.
I know. There are some really nice benefits for the military out there.
That's great. So Christy wants to know, how did you get out of the parking lot?
Oh, so finally we were kind of at our wits' end, and there's a bit of a funny scene in there about being in the grocery store with Ray trying to talk to the clerk, and no, if I give you this, will you give me money? Try they might understand if he talked louder. That didn't happen. We went back, and I don't know, I had gotten the Google Translate app, and it had never really worked for us. And I was like, oh, I should just give this one more try. And so I typed in, stuck in parking lot, can't get out, no money. And I showed it to the clerk, and he studied it for a really long time, but I think he got it. And then he pointed to himself. He's like, me? And so we figured out he was going to come with us. Uh-huh. He came with us. And then we figured out that we actually had to pull up to the gate because it had a pressure plate. And then it flashed up how much money, and he took money out of his pocket and paid for us to get out. And we handed him a $20 bill, US $20 bill, and thought, ooh, I really hope that he can exchange that somewhere, that's useful to him in some way. So,
yeah. That's so lovely. I mean, I'm sure that you experience, well, I know because I've read your story, that you experienced a lot of kindnesses along the way.
Oh my gosh, it was amazing.
Yeah, that Lorinda says, Sandy wants to know how you've changed as a traveler since the trip. And I'm sure that ties in with encountering people around the world from different cultures. How have you changed as a traveler?
Well, I travel very light.
Yeah,
for sure. I used to travel very heavy, and now, I mean, we made the decision when we went on this trip to only travel with what we could carry. So each one of us had a backpack, and that's it. And I have found that honestly, that's really all I need to travel. So I travel pretty light. I try really hard not to stress about things because it doesn't make it any better.
No, it doesn't make it easier. I mean,
it doesn't make it easier.
Stress is not the pathway to the solution, is it?
No.
In life or in traveling. And
it's
yet,
not.
Alas, right. Let's see. So answered the question about the luggage, right? And I can vouch for Lisa traveling with nothing but a backpack. Mm-hmm.
Even with my laptop, everything else.
Yep, absolutely. And did you make it to Africa?
We did make it to Africa. Yes. We were actually, our trip to Africa was odd. We were supposed to be in Africa for a month because Ray actually volunteered at a few different locations. He volunteered for a month in Da Nang, Vietnam. So we were in Da Nang for a month. And then also in Duli Khel, Nepal, which is about half an hour outside of Kathmandu. So we were in the foothills of the Himalayas for a month. And then he was supposed to volunteer for at least 2 to 4 weeks. I can't remember how long in Africa. And we got there, and in between the time that our paperwork had been approved and the time we got there, the government changed, the people who were in charge changed, and they were like, nope, no can do. And it actually worked out okay because we all got really kind of sick in Africa. Yeah. Not from anything bad, but we all had to take the malaria medication there, and it just really messed with us, all of us. We were all over the place.
Yeah.
So we just ended up staying for a couple of weeks and visiting and going up to Malay National Park and getting to see the elephants up close and personal, which was very cool. And baby warthogs are the cutest things ever.
Are they really?
They are so dang cute. Yeah. Yes.
You wouldn't
the big ones aren't that cute, but yeah. Oh my God, the babies are so cute.
Yeah, you wouldn't think. Well, that's how it is, I guess, sometimes.
Yeah.
Susan Chase Foster wonders how your travels and experiences in other cultures have affected your worldview. We actually talked about this when we were traveling together. Mm-hmm. So yeah, how did this whole thing affect your worldview?
We did talk about this, and we talked about it a little bit too, in terms of why I wanted my kids to see the world. And I think that for both myself and Ray, as well as, kind of introducing the kids to different places around the world, it just opens your heart and your mind to what other people go through in their lives. They have a totally different experience in the world than we do. And I even in Cambodia going and, you learn about the Khmer Rouge and, the genocide that happened there. But when you go to the killing caves and then you go downstairs and you hear the stories about them throwing babies down these caves, and then you go and you see the pile of skulls in there, you see what a different life these people have led. And I think that it opens your heart and gives you empathy for what other people are doing, what's happening to them in their lives. It opens your worldview.
Right.
I think it makes you just an easier human being and a more understanding human being.
Yeah, it really challenges your assumptions. What you think you know is not all there is to know. Mm-mm. And the way that you see everything from family to government isn't the only way to think about it. Right.
Right.
Yeah. And that everyone experiences grief. Yeah. It's such a, there's no substitute really for going somewhere and experiencing that location and the humans who are there.
Mm-hmm.
I know you
very much so
share that philosophy. Couple of writing questions, and then we'll bring it to a close and make sure remind everybody that if you want to buy this awesome book, which if you haven't, I know you do want to now, there is a link that Claire has popped up. She just did it again. That's the link from Village Books through which you can purchase the book. So Susan Greason wants to know, did your husband help you with the book?
No.
Nope.
In fact, Susan, he never even read it until I printed the ARC.
Yeah.
Sometimes I would ask him questions, but he doesn't remember. I kept the journal and I kept the blog, and he's got pictures, and I asked him sometimes his remembrance of how things were, and we would talk about some things, but no, other than that, what he did help me with though is that he was like, you can do this, go.
Yeah. And probably remembering things from time to time too, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So then Dana wants to know, what inspired you to keep writing and keep pushing and slogging through the writing? Because it's totally took you from the beginning to the publication 5 years.
5 years, yeah.
Right. And I know there were some breaks, some times where you took a breather in between. So what kept you moving?
I think I'm really good at starting things and not always good at finishing. And I know for sure, like I said in the beginning, that writing a book for me has just always been a dream. And I don't know where that came from. It had just always been a dream of mine. And so I really, really wanted to finish. And so I just kept doing it. And you got to take the knocks with that too. But it's so worth it. It's so worth it.
Yeah. I would just add to that I know that you talked to a lot of people about the fact that you were writing the book. So there was a lot of accountability for you to actually finish it. And you invested other people in your writing through your critique groups and through the narrative project and through, other means. So people were cheering, tapping their toes, waiting for your chapters to come forward. Yeah.
Oh yeah. I actually wrote something, I was able to do a live book signing today down at Village Books. And I was so honored by all the people that showed up. And I wrote a little message on Facebook earlier and said, that this had always been a dream, but what I didn't expect was the community that came along with me on the journey, that was cheering me along. And it was amazing. It was an amazing feeling.
Yeah, that was pretty great to be there. I mean, we haven't had a live event for a long time. So just to see everybody coming in and other writers who are in the process of getting their books ready to go, it is pretty powerful to see somebody who's been all the way through. Right? Yeah. Lorinda says that your color-coded calendar helped a lot too.
It did.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Lisa, is there anything else that you want to say about either the story or your writing journey or traveling that we haven't covered?
I would really just say that if you are at all interested in writing, then go for it and look for help, because there's a lot of resources out there. I know the Narrative Project for me was an incredible resource that I don't know that the book would be what it is without that. And to Village Books, thank you so much for being such a great support to authors and for inviting me to come down and sign books today. It was an incredible feeling, and I'm so proud to help support independent bookstores.
Yeah, that is absolutely a great place to close and to remind people that our independent bookstores, local bookstores, are the places to buy books. That is the place to buy books. And a lot of those independent local bookstores are even, you can buy them online and they will get them to you right now. So yeah, it's really during this time when we've been closed off from one another, and so grateful to see things opening again. So fingers crossed that travel will be a possibility for all of us again very soon.
I know. I'm very much looking to getting back out on the road.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, Claire, are you there? Hi.
Here I am. Hello. Gosh, this has been fun to listen to. Yeah. I had so much fun today at the store. That was like, it just felt, I don't know, like a homecoming or something, having that community event again. Just did my soul good. So
a lot of hugs, a lot of breathing a sigh of relief, right?
Yep. Yeah. Yes. And it was a great celebration for Independent Bookstore Day. So and I want to say, having read your book, Lisa, I want to say that I found it very inspiring.
Thank you.
Especially I loved particularly the story where I believe it's when RJ first gets really sick. And I think that Ray and your other son went somewhere else. And so it was you and RJ, and you were realizing that you needed to go into full protective mom mode. Like, I need to get my kid medicine. I need to figure this out. And you were not in an easy place. I mean, you were rarely in an easy place, but you were particularly in a challenging spot at that point, at that hotel, and getting out into the world and going to a store and finding something for him. And it was really inspiring. So
Oh,
as a mom, as the one who leads the motherhood book group at Village Books, I was just that I'm always looking for that at that angle. And yeah.
Well, speaking of book clubs, I'm available for book club interviews. So if anyone wants to use the book as a book club book,
good idea.
You can call me and I'll come speak.
That's great. That is great. Book groups love it when authors come to visit. So I know we're putting your book on our ballot.
Yay!
My book group is fully a democracy. We put the titles on the ballot, and those who get the most votes are the ones who end up. So thank you both today for a great conversation. This was just lovely. And thank you to the audience for turning out today. Thank you to those of you who came to the signing earlier, and to everyone who purchased a book already. Just here I go one more time, popping that in the chat. There's the link to buy the book.
Thanks, Claire.
Final words?
Just what a privilege to be on the journey with you, Lisa, and to be able to be up here and see you, Claire, and see people in person and get hugs. And so, and everyone, please, buy the book and be inspired, even though we haven't been able to travel. Be inspired.
Yeah. Thanks, everybody. Thanks for all the support and love. It means so much.
Yeah.
Okay. I think with that, we will say good evening.
Okay. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Take care. Lots of love.